time for another episode of That's So Bizarre, where I share stories of ordinary people who experience the weird, the wacky, and the wonderful. I'm your host, author, hippie, gypsy pirate, Becky Pourchot. Welcome. So tonight's story is a really good one, and it comes from a dear friend of mine named Tim Baker, who is also an author. This is his publishing company, Blind Dog Books. And before I start this story, I got to put on my hippie gypsy pirate scarf. There we go. And okay, so this story takes place in Rhode Island, where Tim grew up. Tim was back from college on winter break, and it was New Year's Eve day, and he and all of his buddies were out in the yard playing football. When all of a sudden they hear this screeching sound, and this car pulls up, this Oldsmobile, and out comes Steve. Steve's a friend of theirs, and Steve says, "Hey guys, you want to come to my house for a New Year's Eve party tonight? My parents are out of town." Well, Tim and his friends thought, sure, that sounds like a good time. That's a good thing to do on a New Year's Eve. So they said, yeah. So later that night, they went over to his house. So they had a great time. They were having a blast at that party, and everybody was drinking, probably too much. Steve had a lot to drink, and he turned to Tim, and he said, "You know, I think I'm going to go over to Eva's house." And Tim said, "Why would you go to Eva's house? You guys broke up." And he says, "Well, I'm thinking about getting back together with her. I think if I go over there, she'd be all for it." Tim kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, "All right, go." So Steve left his own party and drove off to Eve's house. Well, a couple hours passed, and they were having a blast. Tim said he brought 2 crates of records, milk crates of records, and he played them all night, and everybody was having a great time. Then the phone rang about 12:30, and one of Tim's friends picked it up, and they said, "Hello?" It was Eva, and Eva said, "Hey guys, Steve's here, and he is really drunk. He just fell down the stairs. I think you guys need to come and pick him up because I don't think he can drive home." Well, Tim and his friends agreed. They said that's no big deal. They could do it. This is Tim and one of his friends got in the car in Tim's Toyota and drove off towards Eve's house, which was about a mile away. So what I failed to mention is that Steve, while Eve was on the phone with Tim's friend, Steve was actually got up, and he got back in the car and he drove. So here we have it. Steve is drunk off his ass, and he is driving his car like mad, like a wild man, and he's driving it down the road headed east, right? And he's in the wrong lane. Tim and his friend in their Toyota are in the right lane, driving straight down the same road. Just what you think would have happened, the worst that would have happened. The 2 cars collided. Tim's car was set flying, and Steve's car went in the other direction. Tim does not remember much of this, not much at all. In fact, everything from this point forward was relayed to him through reports and first responder reports. So apparently, looking at the pictures, Tim said Steve's car looked like it was barely scratched. Tim's car, on the other hand, was completely totaled. It looked like nobody should come out of that car alive. Steve did not make it. He died that night. Tim and his friend, they were pulled from the jaws of life, and the emergency rescue team pulled them out, and they came out with barely a scratch. Now, some legal issues came up about this, and so a lot of research, a lot of police reports were taken or were recorded. Tim says that from all of the first responder reports, all of the people who got there first, who saw what was happening, they all said, all of them said they saw a middle-aged woman at Tim's door where Tim was trapped in, and she was leaning over, talking to him, and she was saying, "Timmy, everything's okay. Everything's going to be all right. You're okay." Well, they afterwards, Tim started asking around. He saw these reports and heard about this woman and what she had been saying to him, and he wanted to know more. He came from a really close-knit neighborhood where everybody knew each other. Nobody knew who these people were talking about. Nobody knew who she was. So Tim decided on his own that he was going to figure this out. So he started going door to door. Every house in his neighborhood, he'd knock on their door and ask them if they knew of this woman. Nobody did. To this day, nobody knows who that woman was. When you asked him about this, he says, I think what that woman was saying to me, she was right. Everything is okay. And he told me that everything has always been okay for him, and he feels like he's always been protected. Tim believes that night he was part of, or he had witnessed, or I don't know how to say it. He believes that that woman that those people saw was his guardian angel. And he believes to this day she is with him. Isn't that a cool story? What do you think of that? Does anybody else out there have guardian angel stories? I don't think I've ever heard one. I hear a lot of stories about ghosts, weird precognition, ESP sort of things. I never hear anything about guardian angels or angels at all. If you've got a story, send it to me at stories@hungryghostbooks.com. And if you like these kind of stories, if you like stories that make you go, huh? You might also like my books. I'm an author of 5 books, and you can find them at beckypourchot.com. So I hope you had a good time enjoying this story today, and I appreciate you staying to listen. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you again.